Both FMGCs exchange data through a cross-talk bus and are synchronized. When both FMGCs crosstalk, they are in dual mode of operation. The FMGC which drives the synchronization is called master. The master FMGC is automatically determined by the engagement status of the autopilot flight director. If autopilot 1 is on, FMGC 1 is master. If autopilot 2 is on, FMGC 2 is master. If autopilot 1 plus 2 and/or flight director 1 plus 2 are on, FMGC 1 is master. Here, FMGC 1 is the master as autopilot 1 is on. The autothrust is driven by the master FMGC. Note, when flight director 1 plus 2 are on, each FMGC drives its flight director and FMA on its on side PFD. If the crosstalk is lost between both FMGCs, each FMGC operates independently. This mode of operation is called independent mode. The crew is advised by a message on the scratch pad, independent operation. Notice the amber IND light on each MCDU, which indicates that the on-side FM has detected an independent mode of operation. In independent mode, each FMGC drives its own FG, autopilot flight director, its own EFIS, PFD, ND, and its own MCDU. The crew must make the same entries on each MCDU in order to have the same guidance orders for both autopilot FDs and the same information displayed on EFIS and on MCDU. When the crosstalk is recovered, the FMGCs revert automatically to dual mode. Let us review the failure of one FMGC. FMGC 1, for example. Let's assume we are in flight and no previous faults have occurred. If autopilot 1 and autothrust were engaged, autoflight, autopilot off, and autothrust off are triggered on ECAM. Autopilot 1 and autothrust go off. Note, you can re-engage the autopilot on the healthy side, in our case, autopilot 2. If autothrust has disengaged, it can be re-engaged at the same time. Notice the amber FM1 light on the MCDU, which indicates that the on-side FM has failed. MCDU1 is now a copy of the other MCDU with the scratchpad message OPP FMGC in process. This mode of operation is called single mode. Both FMAs display to Flight Director 2, indicating that Flight Director bars on both PFDs are driven by FMGC 2. Additionally, only FMGC 2 position is computed and FMGC 2 tunes the offside nav aids. As a consequence of single mode, ND1 displays set offside RNG mode and map not avail messages as long as ND1 range and mode are not set identically to those of ND2. Here the captain's ND has to be set to the same range as the first officer's ND in order to be able to display navigation map. Set captain's ND range to 80. Let's review a similar failure called FMGC reset, which is a temporary failure of one FMGC caused by a software interruption. During the time of the reset, the mode of operation is single mode with slightly different effects. You are in cruise. Autopilot 1 is on. Flight Director 1 plus 2 are on in managed mode. Read the title of the failure. The warning, Auto Flight, Autopilot Off, is displayed on the engine warning display. The autopilot has tripped off because its on-side FMS has experienced a reset and a managed mode was engaged. After review and confirmation from the pilot flying, clear auto flight. Observe that the flight director has reverted to heading vertical speed modes and that Autopilot 1 is no longer displayed on the FMA. FMGC 1 is in auto reset. During the time of the reset, the FM mode of operation reverts temporarily from dual to single mode of operation. Since FMGC 1 is in auto reset, Autopilot 2, Flight Director 2 and Auto Thrust are fully available. Note, depending on the autopilot modes initially engaged and on the type of reset, autopilot loss and flight director reversion may or may not occur. In this example, we are facing one of the most serious cases. During the time of the reset, ND1 displays Map Not Avail red message. Both MCDUs display the aircraft status page with Please Wait on the scratch pad. FM1 light is illuminated on the MCDU. Auto-tuning of nav aids may be lost on side 1. Note, do not use the MCDU while Please Wait message is displayed in order not to increase the reset time. The reset is usually over after a few seconds. All functions are recovered. This is indicated by the disappearance of the "Please wait" and "Map not avail" messages, as well as by the extinguishing of the FM1 light. Check your flight plan and the tuned nav aids. Re-engage the Autopilot 1 and Managed modes. Re-select the most convenient MCDU page. We have studied an FMGC1 reset. We will now review an FCU fault. Suppose the aircraft is in descent. You are the pilot non-flying. Autopilot 1 and autothrust are engaged. On the engine warning display, read the title of the failure. Note that FCU1 failure has no consequence on the FCU indications, since FCU2 has automatically taken over. The pilot flying will ask you to perform the ECAM actions. Here, only the barometer reference has to be cross-checked between the PFDs, the EFIS control panels, and the standby altimeter. Indeed, FCU2 drives both PFD1 and PFD2, including the baro reference. After review and confirmation from the pilot flying, clear autoflight. The status page is displayed for review. No system capability degradation is shown. You can see in the Inoperative System column that FCU1 is now inoperative. Clear status. ECAM action completed. We will now review the unlikely double FCU failure. Autopilot 1 and autothrust are on. You are the pilot non-flying. On the ECAM engine warning display, read the title of the failure. The consequences of the FCU1+2 failure are: both autopilots are lost, autothrust is lost, and thrust is locked. Thrust lock message on FMA. All FCU controls and indications are lost, including the EFIS control panel. On the engine warning display, an additional amber caution comes up. Engine thrust locked is triggered every 5 seconds. The procedure asks to move the thrust levers out of the climb detent so as to recover manual control of the thrust. We will do it for you in order to cancel this ECAM caution. The thrust is now manually adjusted by the pilot flying. Note on the PFD that all targets, speed, heading, altitude are lost, and red flag altitude alert is lost. Baro reference changes to standard, whatever the previous setting. Flight path vector is displayed. FMA indications are lost. LS deviation scales are displayed. Mach number indication is lost. On ND, ROSE navigation mode 80 nautical miles range is displayed, regardless of the position of the range selectors on EFIS control panels. Needle 1 VOR ADF is related to VOR 1. Needle 2 VOR ADF is related to ADF 2. Weather radar image is lost. Red weather range message. The pilot flying will ask you to perform the ECAM actions. You will have to deal with the first failure, autopilot off. Clear auto flight. Then you deal with the second failure, autoflight FCU1+2 fault. Check the PFD baro reference, automatically set to standard, with the standby altimeter. Once below the transition level, set the standby altimeter reference to the actual QNH. Once the procedure is achieved and confirmed by the pilot flying, clear autoflight. The status page is displayed for review. As the baro reference is 1013 hectopascals, you have to determine the altitude correction to be applied to get the proper altitude reading, as a function of QNH minus 1013. The approach capability is degraded to Cat 1. You can see in the Inoperative Systems column that both FCUs, both autopilots, and the autothrust are now inoperative. After review and confirmation from the pilot flying, clear status. ECAM action completed. We will now review a possible MCDU malfunction. In case you cannot insert any data into the scratch pad, nor change any MCDU page, the MCDU is locked. Such a failure is not automatically detected. To recover the faulty MCDU, simply turn it off and after 5 seconds, back to on. The same procedure would apply in case of an MCDU failure indicated by the amber annunciator fail on the MCDU itself. You can try to recover the faulty MCDU, turn it off and after 5 seconds back to on. If it gives no result, turn it off again.